A crisp October morning at Riverside City Zoo began as any other. Parents pushed strollers, children shouted with excitement near the enclosures, students hurried toward the predator pavilion. No one expected that a peaceful day could collapse into chaos in seconds. A sudden alarm pierced the air, followed by the dry voice of the head of security over the loudspeakers. The words carried no emotion, but they hit the crowd like cold water. A large predator was on the loose. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Moments earlier, visitors held ice cream cones and cameras. Now they ran, dropping bags and children's toys. Sirens split the air, drowning out screams. Metal gates slammed shut around the pavilions, but safety felt far away. Security officers rushed down the concrete paths, tranquilizer rifles at the ready, shouting clipped commands. No one knew where the lion was, but everyone understood that seconds could decide the fate of dozens. Then he appeared. From behind the trees emerged a massive male, his golden mane burning like fire against the autumn branches. Apollo moved with confidence, unhurried, as though every step was deliberate. He did not respond to the panic, did not scan for prey. His gait carried purpose, though only one man could understand it. Walter Harris stood at the main gate, leaning on his cane. People ran past, shouting at him to move, but he remained still. His face showed no terror, only sharp focus. To an observer, his calm looked like madness, yet inside recognition had already begun. In every movement of the lion he saw gestures too familiar to ignore. This was no stranger. This was Apollo, once an abandoned cub who had lived in his care 2 decades earlier. Seconds stretched unbearably long. Security tried to form a corridor. The zoo's veterinary director kept the animal in her sights through binoculars. Orders crackled over radios, guards prepared to fire if necessary. But Walter did not move. In the chaos of sirens and panic, he stood rooted in place, as if the rest of the zoo had vanished. For him, the world had narrowed to a single creature. Its stride carried no aggression, but something else. A memory, not yet clear, but pressing upward from deep within time. In that moment, the question was not why Walter refused to run. The question was what he knew about this lion that no one else did, and that knowledge anchored him when everything else demanded escape. If moments like this move you, leave a like and write in the comments which city you're watching from. Years before this day, a tiny cub had arrived at Midland Zoo. He was born weak and his mother refused to nurse him. For wild animals, such rejection meant a death sentence. But among the staff was a keeper who had faced the hardest cases before. His name was Walter Harris. Taking responsibility for the cub was not a sentimental choice, but a necessity. Veterinarians warned survival required round-the-clock care. Walter agreed, knowing months of labor lay ahead. Every 3 hours he prepared formula and fed the cub from a bottle. Nights and days blurred together. He slept on a narrow cot beside the enclosure, ready to respond to the faintest sound. The first weeks were a trial. The cub cried often, ate poorly, and his body fought for life. Walter recorded every detail, followed veterinary advice, and adjusted routines. Slowly, Apollo stabilized. He began to stand, to react to the world around him. Walter never forgot the cub's first shaky steps across the wooden floor, or the faint, broken growls that sounded more like whispers than roars. Caring for Apollo became a discipline. Morning play sessions doubled as training. Every reaction was noted, every habit studied. Walter never forgot he was raising a predator, and so contact stayed within strict boundaries. He avoided carelessness, but worked daily to build trust. Over time, Apollo learned to respond to signals, to adapt among other animals, to grow into strength. Months passed, and the helpless cub became a confident young lion. He fed himself, moved with assurance, and was ready for socialization in the group. For Walter, another stage began: retirement. After decades of service, he knew he had to step aside. Saying goodbye was painful but inevitable. He left the zoo with countless memories and dozens of animals raised, but Apollo held a unique place. Years slipped by. Walter rarely returned to Riverside City Zoo, unwilling to disturb his former charges. Yet the memories of those first months never faded. And on the day Apollo re-emerged as a grown lion, Walter's mind filled with the old images. Midnight feedings, fragile steps, the soft voice of a cub. That was why he did not run. He was held not by reckless bravery, but by the certainty that a bond once forged cannot be erased by time. The central path of the zoo felt like a drawn wire, vibrating with tension. Every sound, every shift, seemed dangerous. At one end stood Apollo, moving steadily forward. At the other, Walter Harris remained motionless near the gate. Between them lay only shrinking distance. Security formed a human corridor. Rifles were raised, tranquilizer darts loaded, but no order came to fire. Head of security David Brooks knew haste could end in disaster. A dart might sedate the animal, or provoke an uncontrollable reaction. One mistake could endanger everyone. Through her binoculars, Dr. Laura Spencer tracked the lion's behavior. Ear position, breathing rhythm, fluidity of steps. Nothing resembled panic or aggression. Apollo's focus was fixed entirely on one figure. This did not match any familiar scenario. He moved not as a hunter seeking prey, but as something beyond instinct pulled him onward. Walter stood firm, the cane steady at his side. Cold wind pressed through his coat, but he gave no visible response. He knew one step forward could read as a challenge, one step back as flight. The only choice was stillness. He heard no voices, no commands, only saw the lion's gaze. Apollo advanced. Time stretched. He paused, as though listening to buried signals, then moved again. Tension mounted. Brooks tightened his grip on the rifle. The guards waited. A few more strides, and the moment would be irreversible. This was the point of no return. Options of retreat no longer existed. Everything now hinged on the lion's next move, and Walter's decision to remain. He knew he had no control beyond this. So he stood unflinching, prepared for whatever would come. Apollo slowed, his body lowering, posture softened, shoulders sank, head dipped below the line of his back. To specialists, this was a clear sign. Caution, not attack. Walter stayed motionless, cane gripped but unused, balance held. His eyes fixed on the lion, carrying neither fear nor joy. He made no gesture, left the choice to the animal alone. Apollo halted within meters. His breathing quickened, nostrils flared as if catching a remembered scent. Seconds hung heavy. Security froze, rifles ready, but still no command to fire. Dr. Spencer noted each signal: tilt of head, stance of paws, depth of gaze. Aggression was absent. Then came the unexpected. Apollo stepped forward, stopping directly before Walter. Golden eyes locked on the old man's face. Silence spread, as if even sirens faded. The lion tilted his head, echoing the gesture of a young cub listening for something familiar. Walter exhaled gently, offering no command. Apollo stretched his neck, sniffed the air, drew close to the outstretched hand. For long moments he inhaled the scent, matching it against memory. Then, in a gesture that stunned every witness, he lowered his head and allowed the man to touch his mane. The contact lasted seconds, yet it was enough. Evidence was recorded. Memory from decades ago had not vanished. It was not miracle or trick, but observable behavior. Security stayed alert, weapons raised, but the atmosphere shifted. Fear gave way to measured respect. For witnesses, the moment proved bonds could endure longer than assumed. For Walter, it proved something simpler. What he had given 20 years before had never been lost. After the contact, a pause settled on the path. Security stood tense, the veterinarian watching closely, all aware the crisis needed resolution. Walter straightened and turned toward the enclosure. He spoke no words, made no gestures, only took the first deliberate step. Apollo followed. His movements remained calm, steady. Security maintained the corridor, forming a moving boundary around man and lion. Weapons stayed ready, though hands no longer shook. From distant barriers, evacuated visitors returned to watch. Hundreds of eyes followed the pair, an elderly figure with a cane and a massive lion walking behind. Phones and cameras captured every moment. The procession moved slowly, almost ceremonial. Walter advanced, cane tapping lightly. Apollo trailed, sometimes lifting his head toward him. Guards encircled the scene, their synchronized steps sounding like a drumbeat. No one dared interrupt. Even staff remained back, recognizing the need for silence. At the enclosure, tension peaked. The gate stood open, staff checking locks. Apollo paused at the threshold, his gaze fixed on Walter, a hesitation heavy enough to freeze the crowd. Breath held, weapons ready. Then the lion stepped forward, first cautious, then with acceptance. He entered, halted near the fence, posture subdued. Walter approached the bars, resting a hand on the steel for a moment. Apollo did not turn away, as if confirming this was not an ending, only a continuation. The gate clanged shut. Relief washed over the staff. Shoulders eased, lungs exhaled. Yet a quiet sadness lingered. The connection witnessed was extraordinary, but it remained an exception. It had closed the crisis but left questions science had yet to answer. By evening, the crisis was declared over. Apollo was secured, systems restored, staff breathing again. But the administration knew the incident demanded scrutiny. The next morning, an investigation began with engineers, security, veterinary staff, and external consultants. Auditors discovered a rare failure in the electronic locking system. Statistically unlikely, but it had opened the way for escape. For leadership, the message was clear. Even modern technology required constant revision. New inspection protocols were introduced, and equipment replacement schedules tightened. Policy changed as well. The event revealed the gap between current practice and the legacy of long-time staff. Many keepers had spent decades with animals, and their experience was too valuable to ignore. A new program allowed retired keepers to visit under strict supervision, with security and veterinary staff present, with registration and medical checks. The zoo recognized that some bonds could not be severed without loss. At the same time, Great Lakes University launched research into emotional memory in big cats. Data from the Apollo incident, camera footage, behavioral logs, staff reports, formed the basis. The aim was to understand not just one case, but the broader mechanisms of long-term interspecies memory. The steps taken did not erase fear, but turned it into progress. Where headlines might have ended, systemic change began. Administrators admitted openly one failure was too costly, but if used as a lesson, it could drive development. So the review concluded. Out of chaos came a new policy, built on honesty and respect for those who dedicate their lives to animal care. The meeting between Walter Harris and Apollo did not end with the closing of the gate. It sparked research and education. Great Lakes University with Riverside City Zoo launched an observation program to study emotional memory in big cats. Researchers tracked Apollo's behavior, compared it with peers, and gathered long-term data. Findings were not final, but observations suggested animals could store memories and form bonds beyond accepted science. Each monthly visit by Walter became part of the protocol. Always escorted by veterinarians and guards, he stood at the enclosure. Apollo reacted predictably. Breath changed, posture shifted, gaze fixed on the familiar face. All of it recorded, studied, analyzed. Meanwhile, the zoo developed educational programs. School groups learned not only biology but the importance of empathy. Guides used Apollo's story as illustration, not of taming, but of responsibility and respect. Teaching materials stressed discipline, professional care, survival. For Walter, visits became part of his later years. He avoided publicity, refused interviews. His presence at the enclosure symbolized continuity. Staff noted how calm each session remained. The program reminded all that elder experience must not be lost. Over time, the story shed its sensational frame. It became a teaching tool, helping people understand that animals can carry more than instinct. Apollo lived his life, Walter aged, but the thread remained. It served not only personal memory, but the collective pursuit of knowledge and respect for nature. Sunlight filtered through branches, casting golden patches across the enclosure. Apollo lay in the shade, breathing steady. Walter Harris stood on the other side of the bars, leaning on his cane, watching. Years lined his face, but his gaze stayed clear. He saw not a symbol or miracle, but a living creature bound to his past. He knew the day Apollo left his pen was an exception never to be repeated. Yet it proved there was more to the human-animal bond than science had measured. Walter understood his role was not to display courage. It was to pass on experience, to remind others. Respect, discipline, and professional work safeguard the future. What had happened was not a miracle. It was the result of years of care. Apollo lifted his head briefly, glanced at him, and closed his eyes again. For the lion, it was an ordinary day. For Walter, it was a reminder that memory endures when built on care. The story ended without grand gestures. Its lesson remained. Love for animals is not in risky acts, but in systems, science, and humility. True strength lies not in one man's bravery, but in shared responsibility for life and trust. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future episodes. Explore the playlist for more stories about how humans and animals shape each other. Question to viewers. What do you believe matters most in the human-animal relationship? Trust, memory, or professional discipline? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't miss the other stories on this channel.
Don't you fall for the guessing vision? Don't you pass more than hard moment love? Don't you fall for the guessing